In honor of the veterans who have served our country, both past and present, First National Bank, a Franklin family community bank, proudly sponsors Veterans of the Valley. Since 1862, First National has provided local decision-making and accessibility, as well as banking products and services to Brazos Valley citizens.
Thanks for joining us on another edition of Veterans of the Valley. He grew up in Fort Worth, Texas, knowing he wanted to be a soldier. He tried to enlist at the ripe old age of 15, even raised money to help the British fight off the Germans in World War II. Although he graduated from Texas A&M in 1950, his military service began in 1947 when he enlisted in the U.S. Navy Reserve. He retired from active duty on 31 August 1982. And in between those dates is a military career that took him to Germany, Fort Hood, Texas 4 separate times, Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, Korea, Vietnam, the Army War College in Pennsylvania, Germany, just to name a few, and finally full circle back to Texas A&M, where he served as Commandant of the Corps until his retirement in 1982. Veterans of the Valley welcomes retired Colonel James R. Woodall to today's show. Mr. Woodall, thank you for being here. Briefly give us a rundown of your military career once you left A&M.
Well, when I graduated from A&M, I had a regular Army commission, but I wasn't 21, so I had to wait a couple of months before I went in, and I went to Fort Hood and then to Germany with the 2nd Armored Division. And from Germany, I came back to Fort Hood, the 4th Armored Division, and then I got out of the Army for a while and decided to go back in, and finally got back in 1960, Fort Benning, 2nd Infantry Division, then to Korea with the 1st Cav Division up on the DMZ.
You were there for about a year, right?
I was 13 months.
Mm-hmm.
And then back to the States, 2nd Armored Division at Fort Hood again, then to Leavenworth, Kansas, Washington, D.C., and I finally got out of Washington, D.C. after 2 years, and went to Vietnam, where I was in the 1st Battalion of the 50th Infantry, as a mechanized battalion, attached to the 173rd Airborne. I was executive officer for 5 months, and then I was a battalion commander for 6 months, a little over 6 months, and then there was a battalion commander relieved in the 173rd Airborne, and so the general sent me over to this other battalion. I commanded.
You actually thought you were going to get to come home a little early.
Yeah, I was getting ready to come home. I was packing to come home.
Mm-hmm.
So I went over to the Airborne Battalion for a while, and finally someone came in from the States, a Airborne Lieutenant Colonel, and took over the battalion. So I came back to the States and came back to Fort Hood again. And from Fort Hood, I went to Army War College, and from there over to Germany, and stayed in Germany for 5 years. And I kept extending in Germany because Tom Parsons, the commandant here at A&M, kept extending, and I wanted the job, so he would extend, so I would extend, and he'd extend, and I extend.
But if you had to extend, at least you were in Germany.
Well, that's right. That's a nice place to be. So I stayed there 5 years, and finally got the assignment as Commandant of Cadets, and came back, and I spent 5 years as, actually I was the Professor of Military Science, the PMS. Mm-hmm. And at that time, the ranking Army officer was the Commandant of Cadets, so that's how I got to be. So I wore 2 hats, actually.
Right. Okay.
And then I retired.
And then you retired after all that. Let's back up to Korea, I guess, is when you really saw your first action as a soldier.
Some people call it a baptism of fire.
Right.
It was, to me, it's more like a sprinkle. But we had some action against the North Koreans on the DMZ, and they'd come across, and we'd usually have 3 or 4 firefights a month.
What year was this?
This was in 1962 and 63.
62, 63.
So they had come across the DMZ, and we'd have ambushes, and we'd try to ambush them. And then they ambushed one of our trucks and they killed, I can't remember, 3 or 4 people from the 9th Cav, which was actually operated in the DMZ. We operated just south of the DMZ. So we put out some pretty strong ambushes every night, a number of ambushes. And the ambush I was leading one night, well, we got contact with the North Koreans. And
was that a regular type thing, or was it pretty much a hit and miss as far as when you would go out at night? Did you have good, solid evidence that they were there, or was it just let's go out and see if we can dig them up?
They were always there.
They were always there.
And of course, one thing we were trying to do is prevent line crossers, because there were spies going north and south all the time, and trying to catch those people. But there was a lot of activity. About a 10-day period, we had some pretty good firefights along the DMZ.
Any particular firefight that you really remember that sticks out?
Well, the one that I was the patrol leader on. Of course, I wasn't supposed to be out there because I was the Battle Group S1. You know, I was a rear echelon guy in the.
Well, how did you end up at the front?
Well, I just volunteered, and I got me put together a patrol and took them out. I think there were about 12 of us, but it was a nice little action. I had one man that got hit, but I think he was hit with our own grenade. You know, we were throwing grenades a little bit, and he got hit in the face, and I pulled the thing out of his face and told him he was all right. Slapped a bandage on it.
And you went on your way.
Continued on.
Anything else about Korea that really stands out?
Well, it was a very long tour. It seemed like it was years, but and it was kind of a depressing place to serve.
What was the weather like there?
Well, it was hot in the summer, and in the winter it was so cold. It was really miserable in the winter.
What was the average day like? Did you go out on patrol every single day, or would there be a stand down day type thing?
Well, I didn't go out on patrol except when I volunteered, because I was pushing papers in the headquarters. But we had one company each night that was on, we call it stakeout, ambush patrols along the DMZ. And the rest of the time, the units were just training.
Okay. So after Korea, where to?
Well, I came back to Fort Hood.
You came back to Fort Hood again, and what duties did you handle there at Fort Hood?
I was the assistant G1 in the division headquarters of the 2nd Armored Division. And I got back, and I was immediately told that the 2nd Armored Division is going to Germany for a maneuver. They call it Operation Big Lift. So my wife was not too happy when I just unpacked my bags. And
you're going to repack.
Then I said, hey, I got to pack again because I'm gone. And so a few weeks after I got back from Korea, I was in Germany, and we went over there and stayed about a month or 6 weeks.
Okay, what was that like?
Oh,
what part of Germany was that in?
Well, that was along the Rhine River, and then in what they call the Odenwald, which is near Heidelberg, up in the mountains there.
Right.
And it was the area where I'd maneuvered in when I was over there the first time, so I knew all the.
You already knew pretty much the area.
And I knew the terrain, yeah.
Okay.
I was glad to get back to Germany after, and all I could say is somebody sold a lot of automobiles since 1954 when I left.
Okay, let's talk about Vietnam. When did you first find out that you were going to be going to Vietnam?
Well, I kept thinking I was going to Vietnam, but they kept assigning me somewhere else. And then finally, when I got to Washington, D.C., they said I had to stay there 2 years, because I thought out of the Commanding General Staff College, surely I would go to Vietnam, but I was sent to Washington. So after I got up there, I checked with the personnel people, and they said, no, you got to stay here 2 years. So I said, okay, I want to go in the summer of 1968, midsummer 1968, and I'm going to go to the 1st Cav Division.
Right. And that almost worked out for you. You thought it was
well, I got my orders. July 15th, 1st Cav Division. That's exactly what I wanted. And when I got to Cam Ranh Bay in Vietnam, they said, check the bulletin board every day and see your assignment. Well, I thought, why don't I've got an assignment. I don't need to check the bulletin board.
You knew where you were going, right?
But I checked the bulletin board anyway. And after about 2 or 3 days, it said 173rd Airborne. What was a shock to me. I was airborne qualified, but I really wanted to be in the 1st Cav. So I reported up to the 173rd Airborne Brigade headquarters and spent the night there. And the first night, somebody started shooting at us, and I thought, I think I'm in the war now. And the next day I flew down on a helicopter. The battalion commander picked me up on his helicopter, flew me down to, they call it LZ Uplift, which was just a big dome area, no grass. It was all red dirt, surrounded by mountains, and you could see smoke coming up all over the place.
Explain what LZ is for those who don't know.
Landing zone.
A landing zone.
So it was a base camp is what
Right.
it was. So I flew in there and I thought, that looks just like Dien Bien Phu, or what I knew of Dien Bien Phu, where the French were defeated in Vietnam,
Right.
54. And I knew it wasn't Dien Bien Phu, but I thought it was weird. So because hills all around and everything. So I landed, and I looked up, and first thing I saw was there was a tent with a French flag.
My goodness.
I thought, well, I'm in the twilight zone. But it turned out to be an Iowa state flag, and that's just a reverse of a French flag. So I was glad to know that I wasn't in the twilight zone. But I was the battalion executive officer in the battalion, the 1st of the 50th. And we were on the coast of the South China Sea. We call it the Bonsang Plains. Mm-hmm. And the enemy in that area was mostly VC, Viet Cong. And I'd been there about 2 months when we were ordered to go back, or not to go back, but to be transferred to the Central Highlands near An Khê, Camp Radcliffe. And our primary mission there was securing the highway. That was the first mission. The second mission was to conduct operations in the local area. Mm-hmm. And we had the highway between An Khê Pass and the Man Yang Pass, it's Highway 19. And we had to keep 2 companies on the highway. We had 2 fire bases. And we put out strong points every day. And there were a number of bridges. We had to guard the bridges. And then we always had one company operating off the highway out in the boonies. Mm-hmm. And we normally had a Mike strike force attached to us. That's a Montagnard soldiers commanded by special forces.
A lot of the viewers may not know what the Montagnards are.
Okay, the Montagnards were the hill tribes of...
they were more or less the indigenous peoples.
The indigenous people, they were the Indians of Vietnam. You know?
Okay.
But they were fairly primitive people, but a beautiful people. And
did you find them to be a really big help to your endeavors?
Well, having an extra battalion attached to you was a big help, and we were. Their purpose was to keep the NVA off guard, so that they wouldn't come up and strike the highway. Mm-hmm. So they served their purpose. They did.
Did the American forces get along with them?
Oh yeah,
fairly well.
Yeah.
They were.
Well, they'd come in and spend the night, then they'd go out in the field and stay 30 days. So we wouldn't see them. Well, I'd see them because I'd go out every once in a while and visit. But they were,
So they would literally go out for 30 days and literally live off the land there in the jungle.
That's right, yeah. So we had actually 2 incidents with the Montagnards that were pretty sad. Tiger got into one of their night perimeters and grabbed one of the guys and drug him off in the jungle. And next morning they found him half eaten. Mm. And in the same area the next month, same thing happened. Tiger got in, grabbed one of these Montagnards. They're little people, 100 pounds or so, 90, but very small. And so we lost 2 soldiers that way. Now our soldiers were pretty spooky. Mm-hmm. They got kind of spooked after hearing that story. So the people were alert at night. And about 2 months later, after these incidents, the Montagnards, the local Montagnard people lived in the Montagnard villages. They came out of the jungle carrying a tiger, and we were convinced that was we called him the man-eater of An Khê. We were convinced that they'd killed the man-eater of An Khê, and the story I was told that the Montagnards killed him with a crossbow. Mm-hmm. And just a few months ago, I was contacting one of my former company commanders about that story, and he said, no, they didn't kill him with a crossbow. They poisoned him. Oh, he said, goodness. I know because I tried to buy the skin. They wanted $500 for it, and I was about to pay it, but then I decided, well, what am I going to do with tiger skin? How am I going to get it treated properly, and how am I going to get it back to the States? So he passed that up, but they did kill the man-eater, so that was great.
What was the other Did you have another Montagnard story? I thought you said there were two of them.
No, there were two
two
people eaten
okay, I got
by
you.
a tiger.
Okay. What were some other events that you can remember that happened there at Elsie Uplift?
One of the in Camp Radcliffe, there was a very large camp. It used to be the base camp of the 1st Cab, a tremendous area, and not too many people in there. Right at one edge of it, there was this tall Sugarloaf Mountain. It was called Hong Kong Mountain. And we had a signal installation up on top of this thing. I don't know how, 1,000 feet or something. And we had snipers. The entire time I was there, we had snipers on that mountain shooting down into there was a hospital there. They shoot into the hospital and they shoot into supply areas and things like that. And we never did. In fact, I put a Montagnard battalion, one of those Mike Strike forces, up there for 3 days trying to catch those snipers. And we never did get them. So I thought that was pretty weird. We got people inside the wire, permanently. I guess the thing I remember most was on February the 14th, Valentine's Day. We had a big ambush, and it was in an area where we hadn't had an ambush before. They always hit us to the west of Ankh, but we never did have anything going to the east, and they pulled off a major ambush on a convoy. And we only had a bridge out there, and very few of our troops were there. We had 2 bridges, I think, and we just had enough people to guard the bridge, but we had no regular forces out there. So so they hit the convoy pretty hard, and that was really one of the actions I got deeply involved in, because I just happened to be in my Jeep leaving the gate of Camp Radcliffe. I normally would fly in my helicopter. I had a Charlie command and control helicopter every day. I would normally fly in that, but that day, for some reason, I decided, well, I'm going to go in my Jeep. And
it was a nice day, so you decided to stay on the ground.
Drive up and down the highway, and just as I left the gate, I heard the explosions, and then on the radio they said this convoy had been hit. So I dashed out there, and immediately I started getting the trucks that were not in the actual kill zone, making those guys move out and clear the area, and then spotted some NVA, and I got my driver and my artillery officer, and we went over and we assaulted these NVA, and after that, and we eliminated them.
Did you have any idea what kind of force you were up against at that time, or was it?
Well, we figured it was probably at least a company of North Vietnamese.
And a company would be how many?
Well, the North Vietnamese, it might be 60, 75.
Okay.
Because they're usually under strength. We had helped eliminate a lot of them. But anyway, after that was over, my driver told me, he said, "Sir, you're going to get me killed." I said, "No, Johnson, I'm going to send you home a hero," and I did. He was getting pretty sharp then, but I sent him home. He made it all right, but he didn't really care for that little escapade.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead. And you didn't you end up sending your XO or so forth back to the rear?
Well, that day they hit us on the other side. There was another ambush, another contact on to the west of this.
Is that the first time that had ever happened?
And before usually we'd have a contact, and that would be it.
That would be it.
But they hit us here with a major ambush. Then they hit us at the other end of the area of operations, and
trying to do an end around on you, more or less.
So I told my executive officer after that, said, anytime we get a contact, if it's in the west, you just going out to the eastern part of the sector, or if it's in the east, you go to the west, and then you can just assume command of that area, because we're talking about a 20-mile stretch there of road.
As far as the convoy would be stretched out.
Well, no, the road. I mean, we're talking about trying to protect 20 miles.
20 miles of road,
or 25, and
that's a lot of road.
It is, yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
Well, that's about all I think.
We've got a few things here on the table that you mentioned, the Montagnards and the bow with the tiger, and obviously this is not the bow, but this is one that you brought back.
Yeah, this is what I thought killed the tiger. Now I should have known better. This is the quiver, and you can see this is made out of bamboo. These these arrows. But
and all of these were obviously hand fashioned and handmade by the local indigenous people.
And this is this is really some fine work if you look at it, and it's got the little trigger there, and this is pulled back and placed in there, and the arrow there, and
Did you ever get a
pop the
chance to
trigger.
see them use one of these, even if it was just for practicing to see how accurate they were?
No, I tried to use it, but you know, it's so hard to pull this back, but I did shoot this. But the Moneyard would just stick it in their stomach and pull it back. I couldn't, you know, I couldn't do
And
that.
here's another interesting piece
Well,
that you brought with you.
this is a North Vietnamese, we call them hard hats.
Right.
And the North Vietnamese regulars, the NBA would, a lot of times they would be wearing hard hats. Kind of like our helmet, except,
Right.
except it's really not a.
It wouldn't protect much,
It's
except
a
maybe
sun helmet's what it is, actually, rather than a.
keep the shade off your head, and that's
Yeah.
about all it would be good for.
And so we picked up a lot of those.
You also were kind enough to give us about 15 or 16 pictures we can pull up here, and have some pretty interesting pictures here. Explain this to us, because
Well, that's about whenever the Battle of Britain went on in 1940. I don't know if it's 40 or 41. Probably.
And that's you on the
1940.
left, right?
And
Holding
that's
the-
me on the left, and I've been a collector of stuff all my life, and that was one of my first collections. There was that aerial bomb. I think it's a practice bomb. I bought it in a junkyard, and I had that. So this is my good buddy Joe Earl Hodgkins on the right there. He was my running mate, partner in crime, and so forth.
and this was up at Lake Worth.
And this was out at Lake Worth at my grandfather's store, the
Right.
J.R. Foster Ice and Feed store. And so I decided, well, I was going to help the British, so I put this up, collected money, and then took it down to I think it's the British AIDS Society, and turned it into them. So I'm trying to do my bit. And that was my
That's a strapping young man right there.
freshman year, just turned 17 when I entered A&M. I'd been here a while, because you can see I was pretty underweight.
They already worked you some, huh?
That's right, yeah. And that's the senior ring dance.
Now there's an interesting story behind this.
Well,
This particular picture with you.
the former students had that picture over there for a little article they put in the Texas Aggie some time ago. And then my granddaughter graduated here last year, and she went over to get a ring, and they gave her a brochure about the Aggie ring and so forth, and she opened it up and recognized our picture. They had used our picture.
My goodness.
Without authority.
Did you contact them and talk residuals?
Well, maybe I should. I'll talk.
It's a great picture. Now this.
Okay, those are the survivors of Company D Infantry. We started out with about 38, and we wound up with, this is just before graduation, with 8. And you'll notice the guy in the uniform there on the back row, that's Jarvis Miller, former president. So at one time, the class of 50 had the president and commandant of cadets.
You didn't know it then, but you were both right there.
That's right. And I was about 17 then. That's when I joined the Navy Reserve, and that was in Pat O'Brien's in New Orleans.
And I take it that's a Pat O'Brien's Hurricane sitting
It's
there.
a hurricane punch, I think they call it. And of course,
And your pack of Lucky Strikes.
I was smoking in those days, and there's a pack of Lucky Strikes. And Lucky Strike had gone to war. It's a white package.
Exactly.
And that's me when I was a lieutenant in the 2nd Armored Division. I was in the 41st Armored Infantry Battalion, the platoon leader. In fact, I commanded the same platoon for almost 4 years. So
Goodness sake.
there was only one place to go, and that was up.
Yep.
That's the Ankei marketplace that my battalion civil affairs people built for the Vietnamese, and that's the district chief there. I doubt if he made it.
Right.
And that's General Barnes, the commander of the 173rd Airborne, and that's when they presented me with the Silver Star.
And you were presented the Silver Star due to that battle there on February 14th
Yeah.
of 69.
St. Valentine's
St.
Day
Valentine.
Massacre.
Right. Exactly.
And that's me just popping a few caps, shooting. This is on February the 14th, but the enemy, they were withdrawing. I thought, well, I'll just send them a little souvenir.
Make sure they've left.
And one thing you notice about this picture, everybody's hunched over, and that's I call it the combat crouch.
Right.
Because you think you're making yourself a smaller target. That's Captain Cheney, who company commander of the reaction force that joined us in that battle. And on the right's a Popular Forces platoon leader that came out to help, and that's me in the center. And if you look in the back, I don't know if you can see it or not, but you can see the trucks and the smoke and all that. I've already moved all the trucks out of this area,
Right.
but we're getting ready to make another sweep. That's one of my personnel carriers.
All right. We need to move on here if I can get Sandra to come on back to, because we've only got 3 minutes left, believe it or not. And something else I want to show the people here is, like I said in the open, you have a lot of medals that you were awarded. And this is just the shadow box that you were kind enough to bring, and the folks can see the plethora of awards. And as we get to the top here, you can tell us what those three right there in the middle are.
Well, there's the Silver Star. That's the one with the red, white, and blue ribbon. And there in the middle is the Legion of Merit. And then the other one is the Bronze Star.
Right.
And that's kind of my career in that one case with the battalions and regiments I was in. And
we've only got a couple minutes left, believe it or not. And you said you wanted to talk just a brief minute about the Corps.
Well, that was the greatest job I ever had. Was Commandant of the Corps. And I'm really concerned about the size of the Corps and about the difficulty we're having in recruiting people to come in the Corps. And I will never understand why someone would come down to A&M and not want to be in the Corps Cadets. You get so much. You get a mental toughness. You learn to operate under stress. And there's so many advantages. They're not getting their money's worth if they're not in the Corps Cadets.
And
if you think about it, if we didn't have the Corps Cadets, what would we have? We would have a campus dominated, the dominant force would be fraternities and sororities. And so we might as well call it University of Texas at College Station, because it would soon be just like university over there if it wasn't for the influence of the Corps Cadets.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I'm sure quite a few other people in town would
probably
too.
I'll get some flack about that.
And you probably will.
But you know, I've had flack before.
You've been around it. I think you can weather it.
That's right.
We're out of time totally. I would like to thank you so much for being here. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
You know, Colonel Woodall served his country with pride, honor, and distinction. He had a military career that lasted over 35 years. He's been awarded so many medals that we couldn't mention them all. He had the Silver Star, the Legion of Merit with Oak Leaf Cluster, the Bronze Star with Valor Device and 2 Oak Leaf Clusters, the Meritorious Service Medal with Oak Leaf Cluster, and the Air Medal with 7 Oak Leaf Clusters. The list goes on and on. Veterans of the Valley salutes Colonel James Woodall for his unwavering dedication and commitment to serving the country he loves. For Colonel Woodall, the entire KMU staff, and Tom Turbyville, I'm Kyle Netterville saying thank you for watching. So long for now until the next roll call for Veterans of the Valley. In honor of the veterans who have served our country, both past and present, First National Bank, a Franklin family community bank, proudly sponsors Veterans of the Valley. Since 1862, First National has provided local decision-making and accessibility, as well as banking products and services to Brazos Valley citizens.